In 2004, many nations rejoined the European family. 10 nations joined, the largest expansions of the European Union, and Latvia among those. Now it's our honor to speak to its president, President Edgars Rinkēvičs, who joins me now. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today, Mr. President.
Thank you for having me.
So if we look at these 20 years, you were a diplomat in that time, you were involved here in that time. What is the biggest milestone in terms of all of this?
Actually, the funny thing is that I was very much involved in NATO business because I was working at that point in defense ministry. And of course, as the defense official, I was more concerned about joining NATO, about all the stuff that is related to defense. Very frankly speaking, at that point, the European defense capability was almost non-existent. There was a lot of discussion, but for people here, when it comes to the hard security issues, NATO, of course, was choice number one. Now, 20 years since we joined the European Union, I would say that also the role of the European Union has changed fundamentally. For me, the kind of revolution I experienced was only in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, began its full-scale invasion. I was myself surprised that the European Union was able to take some decisions that we were debating for years to provide military assistance to Ukraine, to introduce sanctions. Yes, we can discuss whether those are efficient. You know that the Baltic states were always, together with Poland, looking for harsher measures, but of course then you have kind of the decision that you have to accept by all 27. But when it comes to the greatest revolution in the European Union, then I would say it's defense. When it comes to opportunities, then economic opportunities, opportunities for young people to study, opportunity for all of us to come easily without any hassle on the border using Schengen area. I think those are very clearly great marks. But of course, there are always things that I do believe we still need to improve as well.
Now you mentioned defense, and of course that year, 2004, isn't just valuable as European Union membership for Latvia, but as you said as well, NATO membership, so that's very important. Interesting you say security first. Now, as you said, in that evolution, that revolution you alluded to in the European Union with defense, do you see that now as something, let's say, is higher on the agenda for Europe, on a European Union level than it was before 20 years ago?
Absolutely. I think that some 20 years ago, we were all looking into Europe without war, without aggression. Well, of course, judging from our history, from our experience, and here I refer to many countries in Central and Eastern Europe, the Baltic states, we knew that we should be very, very cautious when it comes to Russia. But let's not forget there were plenty of ideas about trade area, security area from Lisbon to Vladivostok. I still remember some discussions about modernization programs of Russia. Now it's gone. But at the same time, I think that at that point, the feeling here in this country, I don't know how was it in Poland or in other countries, the feeling here was NATO is about security, European Union is about welfare. I would say currently we understand that things are very much interrelated. If you want to get more foreign investors, if you want to have more activity, you need security. There is a lot of discussion and talk about possible further aggression of Russia against some of NATO members. Definitely, I'm not in that camp that is saying that the war is inevitable. Saying that if we prepare for all kinds of scenario, if we prepare our defense system well, there is not going to be any attack. But at the same time, people are reading those news. People are questioning whether it's worth going for some kind of leisure trip or excursion to Riga, Tallinn, or Vilnius. There are some investors who are giving the second thought whether further invest or not. So from that point of view, yes, at this point security is the key, also for some economic development, further economic development. But at the same time, I would say that judging from those 20 years, even if there is always a lot of criticism in this country that we have had the opportunity to reach better living standard than we are actually living in, comparing, I think that this is day and night we live in now.
Mm-hmm. Day and night, but I think it's curious because we obviously look at the benefits of European membership, and it goes without saying, I think, in probably many metrics, if that's business, the single market, values, etc. But let's look at also that Latvian voice in Brussels. I mean, it was rejoining the European family, but not on equitable level, I think. Now, in 20 years, is there more of a Latvian voice, especially with security in the European Union? Is there more of that voice that's recognized in Brussels?
Yes, I think that it is true for the voice that the Baltic states, Latvia, countries like Poland, Romania, some other our good friends do have now. It has changed actually dramatically since 2022. Unfortunately, I think that we all lost almost 10 years because the illegal occupation of Crimea by the Russian Federation started already in 2014. Somehow we introduced sanctions. We condemned that in the strongest possible terms, and somehow in a very short period of time things went back to normalcy, or almost normalcy. Now I would say that our concerns, our voice is better heard, but at the same time, whether that also impacts the overall policy of the European Union and its member states in a way that I would say is the best course of action, no. From time to time we see that we still have very different opinions around the table. Let's not forget we are 27. We are countries that still believe that Europe should not help Ukraine that much. And of course there are countries that do believe that Europe must do whatever it takes to help Ukraine to win.
But as you said, on those 27 voices, you've seen that, you've been part of it, a family that keeps growing, will likely have more members in future. Enlargement is key to the European Union. One of the main topics, of course, the Western Balkans, which you said Europe isn't doing enough about, Moldova, Ukraine. If we look at Ukraine, for instance, I know that your country has been an ardent supporter, yourself very much an ardent supporter of Ukraine. But how do you characterize such a country joining? I mean, there's this idea of doing this at speed, fast as possible. It's a huge hurdle and challenge, and it would make your country then no longer getting those European funds. It would then be someone that net contributes to Ukraine. Is that something that your country can afford, that other countries can afford?
I think that we are here in a situation that is going to be very challenging and also, I would say, very interesting. You are absolutely right. I think that we haven't started this accession process when it comes to very practical discussions. Those we do hope should start in June. The accession talks, the intergovernmental conference, all that mechanism that has been created for enlargement. And I think that we are going to have a very interesting process and debate because that is going to be quite a dilemma between getting Ukraine fast in the European Union, which I think is in strategic interest of the whole European Union, but also to deal with legitimate questions and issues that different groups in our societies are raising. Farmers about direct payments, about opening market. We know that there are already protests in some of the countries. I was myself meeting with representatives of our farmers' organizations in March, and that question, how speedy that process is going to be, was asked, and the question, how are you going to protect our key interest, was asked. And let's not forget our own experience. Of course, Latvia is a small country. Poland is much bigger. Romania, all things considered, is much bigger than Latvia. For the European Union, of course, it's much easier to accept new members that are small in size, be it population, territory, or economy. So what I anticipate is a very tough process of negotiations. And let's not forget that at the end of the day, it's a decision of all 27 EU member states and their parliaments, because that accession treaty must be ratified by all 27. I don't think that Latvia is going to be the biggest challenger, but I think that there are going to be a lot of issues at this process. So I wouldn't make any prediction how fast the accession process for Ukraine is going to be. But I think that there is a strategic interest. There are many economic issues that need to be addressed. And also there are many legal issues that need to be addressed, as we all know, when it comes to accession talks.
Over 30, I think 35 chapters, lengthy stuff, as you said, average is well over almost 10 years long. But as you said, it's up to potential some member states' national parliaments. Now, ironically, I will ask the question, this region has a certain history, but if you go on one of those neighboring countries, if you go to Hungary, for instance, recently, last year was, I think Mr. Orban met Putin in China, in Beijing, the only EU leader really to do so. If we have a neighbor like that, who is in our European family, who is meeting basically someone that the European is doing everything to make lose, the warrant of his arrest, the terrible atrocity in Ukraine. When you look at that, how can we have that European family? How can we have that assurance that, for instance, Ukraine will join, that others will join? We have someone like Orban doing something very different.
Well, we are all 27. Each of us has the right to express his or her opinion. Each of us has the right of veto. That's the fact. That's how the system works. And I think that also this part is going to be rather challenging, because as we discussed previously, in order to enlarge, all members should vote in favor, and all their parliament should vote in favor. And I don't believe that enlargement ever is going to be the issue for qualified majority voting, because that's a kind of core of the Europe's existence, that those very important strategic decisions we all adopt unanimously. But I do hope, and the history shows that, also when it comes to previous decisions, let's not forget we have had a lot of drama on support for Ukraine, on the beginning of accession process, to name Ukraine as a candidate country, to move forward with other decisions, to impose sanctions on Russia or Belarus. At the end of the day, we all were able to agree. And yes, I anticipate a lot of drama, but let's say not only from one or two countries. I could say that there are going to be many issues from larger number, be it countries that are going to be under the pressure when it comes to the agriculture, when it comes to issues related with European common funds, when it comes to other potential issues that we probably are not aware today, but they can pop up at some point. So from that point of view, I would say that while I do expect a lot of discussions, a lot of harsh exchanges, but so far the history shows that at the end of the day, we all were able to agree. I do hope that strategic interests of Europe, of all of us, will prevail over the politics of the day.
Mm-hmm. Now, security is important. I mean, that's something you know full well in your experience. NATO is a heavy part of that. Europe is waking up to the fact that there is very much a sinister influence of Russia increasingly in its own midst. We've had that and recently seen that over the last weeks. We've had a case, in fact, here out of Latvia as well. Latvian MEP, Ms. Ždanoka. So that was something that I think pointed a certain type of signal. Now, I know that with 25%, maybe even 30% of Russian speakers, how many of these cases are potentially within Latvian society and politics?
Well, this is not a question I can answer easily. We have had one member of the Latvian parliament who was convicted of spying a couple of years ago. We have now one member of the European Parliament under the investigation. Here,
does that concern you?
Well, I would say that Latvia is not something that I would single out. We are just reading about Germany. We are reading news from almost all around Europe. You have people who are Germans or Latvians or Poles or Spaniards who are being caught either for spying for Russia or being as agents of influence. In general, that concerns me a lot. That shows that well, there is a substantial network of both spying and also some influence. Where are we going to end investigating that is another question. That's for courts to decide at the end of the day when they hear the case. But I think that we should not fool ourselves that over the last 20 plus years, Russia, some other countries have made best use of a little bit our own naivete, but also use of good money just to get certain influence, both in national politics and European politics. Mm-hmm. That's the fact. And I think it will take time to clear that mess up. But we also see that you were mentioning some of our politicians. I do think that we are going to see very interesting campaign for next European Parliament. We'll see how things have been perceived by the society at large, who is going to be in the Parliament, who is not. So there is a legal process. And I'm quite confident that it will end in a way that we will see some result one way or the other way, either conviction or person will be cleared from all the charges. But we also have political process, and that is a bit more difficult to predict throughout Europe.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's look at, we took stock of 20 years, and without a doubt there's positive impact for Latvia, for the Baltic states, for these other nations that join, and collectively for Europe as a whole. If we now look to the future, the next 20 years, what are your priorities? And also I'm curious maybe to ask about the 3 Seas initiative, because that's something that makes sense very much on that corridor north-south through Europe all the way, could include the Via Baltica in that. What's your mind? What's next for the EU in this region and also for 3 Seas?
For the EU, I think that the most important issue, of course, is what I already said earlier in this interview. We need to understand that the overall geopolitics and situation in the world is changing. I think that for the European Union, it is very important now to devote more resources, more attention, more effort to build its own defense capability, be it military industry, spending more on defense in all EU member states, because regardless who is going to win US elections, US government President and Congress, all of them, and of course also the American people, are expecting that Europe is going to do more for its own security. And frankly, this is a legitimate demand. We need to spend more, we need to prepare for all kinds of scenarios, and if we do that, then that old nice dream about Europe being a global player is going to materialize. If we are just issuing statements, writing strategies and concept papers and debating that endlessly, nothing is going to change. In order to be efficient, in order to defend ourselves, but also to project some kind of power in the world, the European Union, NATO European members must have real tools, a real toolbox. So that's number one. Number two, yes, I still believe that, and I think you asked that question, that was in your question actually, one sentence I very much agree and support, that in order to be strong, EU must continue enlarging. I am not so sure who is going to be the next one. We have plenty of candidates in the Western Balkans. I think we failed miserably when it comes to our own credibility. We promised many things in the past. We were not delivering as well as many of those candidate countries are doing right now or did in the past. So I think that enlargement, I don't know which countries, but I think that that process must continue. Just to show that we are strong and we are projecting stability and security also in the Western Balkans, in regions like Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova. Well, we see now a very interesting development in Armenia. Let's look closer also to this country. So those would be issues that I would definitely tackle. And number three, yes, that's economy. That's economy, and very interestingly enough, again, I very much look forward to the European elections. I want to see the composition of the European Parliament, and I want to see how we are going to continue with the climate change, how we are going to continue with transformation. There could be very interesting developments also, not in next 20, but in next 5 years.
Right, and next few months as well. As you said, we look towards the elections. But as interesting as the takeaway here, as security as a primary focus point, it reminds me of the Schuman Declaration in the 50s to prevent war, and at the heart of was economic ties, but now we're going back into arming Europe in a security way. Interesting transition almost, that we have both of those pillars together.
Well, I think that this project was extremely successful to prevent wars in the European Union's territory. The project started just after a very bloody war that is known as Second World War. The problem currently is that we see that this instability, that aggression comes from outside of the European Union. And I think that now we have the second task, to make, like it or not, but to make European Union and NATO as the fortress, to withstand all those attacks, and to continue projecting those values that we all share, projecting security and stability, and helping those countries that are under direct attack or could be under attack. Today it's Ukraine, but let's not also forget about some other countries that need our help and assistance. So from that point of view, yes, some 70 plus years later, there is a completely new task for that project. That's a completely new dimension.
Right, a new dimension which will be very interesting to follow. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for sharing all that on this important day.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I'm Sasha Farbach for TVP World.